Ever wonder what really separated us from the rest of the animal kingdom? I mean, long before towering skyscrapers, way before the internet, even before recorded history as we know it, what did our ancient ancestors actually care about? What drove them? If you strip away every piece of modern technology, what is the absolute fundamental core of the human experience? Well, today, we're going to answer exactly that.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're opening up the human blueprint. We're going to reconstruct the foundation of who we are by digging into three core pillars: expression, communication, and connection. Let's find out how we evolved from simply surviving day to day to truly living.
Section 1. The first spark of art.
Way before humans were building actual cities, we were making art. In the deep, dark caves of places like France and Spain, Paleolithic humans would use burnt wood, red earth, and bone tools to paint these incredibly vibrant scenes of the beasts they hunted. And the fascinating thing here is they weren't just keeping a visual inventory of their food supply, they were actually seeking psychological pleasure, trying to capture the thrill of their world on stone. It really proves that the human desire to create art is just as primal and just as ancient as the desire to eat.
Section 2. From sound to the press. Making art alone in a cave is, well, it's kind of lonely, right? As tribes grew into larger societies, humanity desperately needed a way to share ideas across space and time. And the journey to get there is wild. It started in our earliest origins with humans simply mimicking the natural sounds around them, the rustling of trees or the rush of water. Over millennia, those sounds evolved into structured syllables. Fast forward to antiquity, and groups like the Phoenicians actually invented alphabets specifically to keep track of their complex trade networks. And then comes the 15th century game changer, the printing press. Suddenly, boom, a single idea could be duplicated thousands of times.
It's amazing how our ancestors ingeniously adapted their communication to whatever environment they were in. Take Sumerian cuneiform. Living in Mesopotamia, they needed weatherproof records, so they pressed wedge-shaped marks into durable clay. If you buried it, it survived. Contrast that with Egyptian hieroglyphics. Because they had access to river reeds, they invented papyrus, basically the very first form of paper. This allowed them to create beautiful, picture-based records for incredibly detailed storytelling, even if it was just a little more fragile than baked mud.
But, as we know, progress almost never happens without a healthy dose of panic. When the printing press arrived, which is arguably one of our greatest inventions, it wasn't exactly welcomed with open arms. In fact, it was met with absolute terror. Professional copyists, who used to take up to 21 months to hand copy a single book, protested aggressively because they were terrified of losing their livelihoods. Meanwhile, the clergy and political elite completely panicked because they couldn't control the flow of information anymore. Because the press produced identical books at what they considered an unnaturally fast speed, many early printers were accused of witchcraft, and the machine itself was literally cursed as the devil's work.
Section 3. Ancient Marriage Customs.
When it comes to human connection, early marriage was nowhere near standardized. It was deeply practical, highly transactional, and sometimes downright shocking to our modern sensibilities. In Babylon and Greece, we see the formalization of the dowry, basically exchanging wealth for a bride. In ancient Jewish tradition, a poor man often paid with sweat. Texts tell us Jacob worked 7 long years tending flocks just to earn the right to marry. But then you look at certain historic Amazonian tribes, where the groom, after catching his chosen bride, would tie her to a tree and whip her. This was a ritual specifically intended to drive out evil spirits and purify her before they started their life together. It just shows how deeply intertwined marriage was with spiritual beliefs and raw survival instincts.
Section 4. The farewell journey and the dead.
So, from the beginnings of life and partnership, we eventually have to face the end. How did these ancient communities mourn? And how did they even conceptualize death? Well, the archaeological record is honestly a bit chilling. Before we had complex religions and beautiful temples, our earliest ancestors were just terrified of the dead. They couldn't always distinguish between someone who is heavily sleeping and someone who is deceased, and they fully believed the dead held a grudge. So early burials weren't really about honoring the deceased, they were about protecting the living. They would physically tie the hands and feet of a corpse and pile massive heavy stones right on top of the grave. Why? To literally pin them down. They were terrified the dead would rise as ghosts in the night and seek revenge.
Now, contrast that sheer primal panic with the meticulous, highly organized customs of the ancient Egyptians. To them, death was nothing to run from. It was just a continuation of life. But to live well in the next world, your ka, or your soul, needed its original body. Hence the incredible science of mummification. And you definitely couldn't travel empty-handed. They buried their dead with a full set of luggage. We're talking food, drink, weapons, jewelry, and even reading material. They included the books of the dead to help them safely navigate the trials of the underworld.
The Egyptians were actually so comfortable with mortality that they brought it right to the dinner party. This is an incredibly morbid but fascinating little detail. During massive banquets, while guests were feasting on salted fish and roasted meats, the host would literally pass around a small, carved wooden mummy. They'd show it to each guest and say, "Eat, drink, and enjoy life before this catches you." It was a stark, very tangible reminder to appreciate the present moment served right alongside dinner. From painting on cave walls to sending text messages, from fearing ghosts in the night to passing a mummy around at a dinner party, humanity's blueprint is complex, it's resilient, and it's always evolving. We look back at these ancient people and marvel at their ingenuity and, let's be honest, their oddities. But it begs a pretty provocative question for all of us today. Look around at your own life. Which of our modern, everyday customs do you think will look absolutely bizarre to humans looking back at us 5,000 years from now? Think about that for a second. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.